In the dimly lit drawing room of her New York brownstone, the small, intense woman with piercing blue eyes sits surrounded by ancient manuscripts and curious artifacts from distant lands. Madame Helena Blavatsky, the controversial Russian émigré who has scandalized American society with her mysterious abilities and radical ideas, leans forward in her chair, her gaze fixed upon the small gathering of earnest seekers before her. "What I am about to reveal to you," she begins in her thick Slavic accent, "was hidden from the masses for 2,000 years. The Church has systematically erased these teachings, for they undermine the very foundation of their power." The tension in the room is palpable as the assembled disciples lean closer, eager to receive forbidden knowledge from this enigmatic woman who claims to have studied with spiritual masters in Tibet, India, and Egypt. The year is 1878, and across America and Europe, traditional religion is facing unprecedented challenges. Darwin's theory of evolution has shaken biblical literalism to its core. New archaeological discoveries are contradicting cherished religious narratives. Industrialization and scientific advancement have left many spiritually adrift, questioning the relevance of ancient faith in a modern world. Into this tumultuous landscape stepped Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, founder of the Theosophical Society, claiming to offer a synthesis of science, religion, and philosophy that would reveal the hidden truth behind all spiritual traditions. Among her most controversial assertions was that Jesus of Nazareth taught a radically different cosmology than what Christianity eventually embraced, a Gnostic understanding of reality that included the existence of cosmic entities called Archons. IOC, Blavatsky continues, her fingers tracing the weathered pages of a strange manuscript. What conventional Christians believe about Jesus is a fabrication, a carefully constructed myth designed to obscure his actual teachings. The historical Yeshua was not what the Church claims. He was a revolutionary spiritual teacher who revealed to his inner circle of disciples that this material world is not the creation of the true divine source, but rather the flawed product of lesser cosmic entities called Archons. The small audience shifts uncomfortably at this heretical suggestion, but their eyes remain riveted on Blavatsky. She has cultivated this dramatic tension skillfully over years of similar gatherings, knowing precisely how to challenge mainstream religious thinking while offering a tantalizing alternative cosmology that appeals to those disillusioned with conventional faith. According to Blavatsky, these archons were powerful interdimensional beings that ancient Gnostics identified as the rulers of the material cosmos. "They are the cosmic jailers," she declares forcefully, "keeping humanity trapped in ignorance and spiritual darkness. Jesus came not to save humanity from sin, as the Church teaches, but to awaken us to the reality of our imprisonment and show us the path to liberation through sacred knowledge, gnosis." She pauses dramatically, allowing this radical reframing of Christian doctrine to sink in. That is why the Gospel of John begins, "In the beginning was the Logos," the Word. The Logos is not merely speech but divine knowledge, the liberating truth that shatters the illusion of this material prison. Blavatsky rises from her seat, her substantial frame moving with surprising grace as she retrieves an intricate illustration from a nearby table. "This," she announces, holding up a curious diagram showing concentric circles with strange symbols, "is a representation of the cosmic structure according to the ancient Gnostics. It depicts the realm of the pleroma, the fullness of divine reality, surrounded by successive layers of cosmic spheres, each controlled by an archon." Her audience studies the elaborate drawing with fascination, seeing in its esoteric complexity a hidden wisdom that conventional religion has denied them. "The physical universe we inhabit," she continues, "is the outermost sphere, the furthest removed from divine truth. And that is why we experience suffering, ignorance, and limitation, because we exist in a realm dominated by these lesser cosmic intelligences. The revelation that reality itself might be a kind of cosmic deception, orchestrated by powerful beings intent on keeping humanity spiritually captive, resonates powerfully with her listeners. It provides an explanation for the suffering and injustice they witness in the world, a cosmic framework that makes sense of human pain in a way conventional religion has failed to do. The Church, Blavatsky declares with evident disdain, transformed these profound cosmological truths into simplistic moral narratives about sin and redemption, deliberately obscuring the revolutionary knowledge that Jesus actually taught. They did this to maintain control, to ensure humanity remained spiritually dependent on their institutions, rather than discovering the divine spark within themselves. As the evening progresses, Blavatsky delves deeper into her controversial interpretation of Jesus' teachings about these cosmic entities. The Archons, she explains, are not merely abstract forces, but conscious intelligences that actively work to maintain humanity's spiritual ignorance. They accomplish this primarily through what the Gnostics called the counterfeit spirit, a false identity that each human develops through social conditioning, religious dogma, and cultural programming. This false self obscures our true divine nature. Her audience listens with rapt attention, many taking careful notes. They have come from different backgrounds: disillusioned Christians, intellectual freethinkers, spiritual seekers, but all share a common yearning for deeper truth than conventional religion offers. Jesus taught, Blavatsky continues with growing intensity, that these Archons created human bodies as vessels to trap divine consciousness. They designed our physical form with biological drives and psychological tendencies that keep us distracted, focused on survival and material pursuits, rather than spiritual awakening. She reaches for a glass of water, her voice growing hoarse with the passion of her discourse. But he also taught that within each human exists a divine spark, what he called the kingdom of heaven within you, that remains untouched by archonic influence. This divine essence is our true identity, our connection to the supreme Godhead that transcends the flawed material cosmos. Among Blavatsky's enthralled listeners sits Professor William Harrington, once a respected theological scholar at Princeton Seminary, now ostracized for his increasingly unorthodox views. He raises his hand tentatively. "Madame Blavatsky, if what you say is true, why has this knowledge been so thoroughly suppressed? Surely some evidence would have survived." His question reflects not skepticism, but genuine curiosity. He wants to believe this radical reinterpretation, but needs historical validation. Blavatsky smiles, clearly anticipating this question. "Excellent inquiry, Professor. In fact, substantial evidence did survive, though the Church has worked relentlessly to destroy or discredit it. The Nag Hammadi codices in Egypt contain numerous Gnostic Gospels that explicitly discuss the Archons. The Gospel of Judas, the Secret Book of John, the Hypostasis of the Archons, all these texts confirm what I'm sharing tonight. The mention of these ancient texts lends scholarly credibility to her claims, though few in her audience have access to such rare manuscripts or the linguistic skills to evaluate them firsthand. This blend of verifiable historical references with bold metaphysical claims is characteristic of Blavatsky's approach, making her teachings simultaneously scholarly and revelatory. Moreover, she continues, addressing the professor directly, Jesus himself alluded to these cosmic entities in sayings that survived even in the canonical Gospels, though their meaning was obscured. When he referred to the rulers of this age, who did not understand God's wisdom, as quoted by Paul in 1 Corinthians, he was speaking of the Archons. When he told Pontius Pilate that his kingdom was not of this world, he was acknowledging that this material realm is governed by lesser powers. A younger woman at the back of the room, Rebecca Winters, daughter of a prominent Boston industrialist, speaks up hesitantly. "This is all quite disturbing, madam. If these beings control our world, are we simply their victims? Is there no hope for liberation?" Her question cuts to the heart of existential anxiety that such a worldview might provoke. Blavatsky's expression softens, and her response takes on a more encouraging tone. "Quite the contrary, my dear. Jesus came precisely to show us the path to freedom. The Archons maintain their control through our ignorance of their existence. Simply recognizing the reality of our situation, achieving gnosis, begins the process of liberation." Blavatsky rises again and moves to a blackboard where she draws a series of symbols: a serpent, a tree, a female figure reaching for a fruit. "Consider the Garden of Eden story," she says, chalk dust floating in the lamplight. The Orthodox interpretation condemns the serpent as evil for tempting humans to eat from the tree of knowledge. But in the Gnostic understanding that Jesus taught, the serpent was a liberator offering spiritual awakening, while the deity who forbade access to knowledge was actually the chief Archon, the demiurge, masquerading as the supreme God. She pauses, allowing this radical inversion of traditional biblical interpretation to sink in. This is why Jesus said, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Knowledge, gnosis, is not the cause of humanity's fall but the key to our liberation from archonic control. The gathering continues late into the night, with Blavatsky expounding on various aspects of what she claims were Jesus' secret teachings about cosmic reality. She describes the Archons in vivid detail, their origins, their methods of manipulation, their fundamental limitations. According to her account, these entities emerged from a primordial cosmic catastrophe when divine wisdom, which she calls Sophia, attempted to create without her divine partner, producing the flawed demiurge who subsequently generated the Archons to help administer his imperfect creation. Jesus taught, she insists, that though these beings possess considerable power over the material realm, they have no jurisdiction over our divine essence. They can manipulate our bodies and minds, but our spirit remains connected to the true divine source. As the session draws to a close, Blavatsky addresses the practical implications of this esoteric cosmology. Understanding the nature of archonic influence is merely the beginning, she declares. Jesus provided specific spiritual practices to counteract their control, techniques of meditation, visualization, and invocation that strengthen our connection to our higher divine nature. She distributes handwritten sheets containing what she claims are prayers and meditations derived from secret Gnostic traditions, instructing her followers to practice them daily. These are not mere rituals, she emphasizes, but technologies of consciousness that Jesus taught to his innermost circle of disciples, designed to awaken the divine spark within and dissolve the illusions that bind us to this material realm. The following week, Blavatsky's critics, primarily from established religious institutions, denounce her teachings as dangerous heresy. The Reverend Charles Harrington, Professor William's estranged brother and a prominent Presbyterian minister, publishes a scathing editorial in a leading religious journal. Madame Blavatsky's so-called revelations are nothing but a revival of ancient heresies long ago refuted by the Church Fathers. Her portrayal of Jesus as a teacher of esoteric Gnosticism contradicts the clear testimony of Scripture and tradition. Moreover, her doctrine of archonic beings controlling our world borders on paranoid delusion and undermines the sovereignty of God as creator and sustainer of the universe. The controversy only increases public interest in Blavatsky's teachings, swelling attendance at her subsequent lectures. Undeterred by orthodox criticism, Blavatsky continues developing her cosmological teachings about the Archons in her monumental written works, particularly Isis Unveiled and later The Secret Doctrine. In these dense, sprawling texts, she elaborates a comprehensive alternative history of religion, positioning Gnostic Christianity as the authentic tradition that preserved Jesus' actual teachings about cosmic reality. She argues that the suppression of this knowledge represents the greatest conspiracy in human history, a deliberate effort to keep humanity spiritually enslaved by denying access to the liberating truth about our divine nature and cosmic situation. Dr. Eliza Thornton, a former Methodist missionary who abandoned traditional Christianity after witnessing its complicity in colonial exploitation, becomes one of Blavatsky's most dedicated students. What Madame Blavatsky has revealed about the Archons explains so much, she confides to a fellow Theosophist after one session. It accounts for the moral contradictions in conventional religion, how churches preach love while practicing oppression, how they claim divine authority while serving worldly power. If Jesus was right, and these cosmic entities influence religious institutions, then it makes perfect sense that organized religion would become a mechanism of control rather than liberation. Blavatsky's teaching about the Archons resonates particularly with women and others marginalized by traditional religious structures. The idea that conventional religion might be influenced by cosmic entities intent on maintaining hierarchical control offers an explanation for systemic oppression that goes beyond mere human failing. Rebecca Winters, who eventually becomes secretary of the New York Theosophical Society branch, explains this appeal. The doctrine of Archons provides a cosmic framework for understanding patriarchal religion. It's not simply that men have misinterpreted Scripture. It's that the very cosmological understanding underlying conventional Christianity was distorted to serve archonic purposes of control and domination. Not everyone in Blavatsky's circle accepts her teachings about the Archons uncritically. Some members of the Theosophical Society view these ideas as useful metaphors rather than literal cosmological facts. Professor Harrington, while fascinated by Gnostic texts, remains uncertain about the literal existence of cosmic entities controlling human affairs. Perhaps, he suggests during a private conversation with Blavatsky, the Archons represent psychological forces rather than actual beings, projections of our collective human tendencies toward materialism, selfishness, and spiritual blindness. Blavatsky dismisses this interpretation as a half-truth at best. The psychological manifestation is real, she concedes, but it stems from actual cosmic intelligences that precede human consciousness. Jesus understood this perfectly and taught it to those ready to comprehend. During a particularly intense session focused on the nature of the Archons, something extraordinary occurs that will later become part of theosophical law. As Blavatsky describes the methods by which these cosmic entities maintain control over human consciousness, primarily through fear, material desire, and spiritual ignorance, the atmosphere in the room becomes noticeably heavier. Several participants later report feeling a strange pressure or presence. Suddenly, a manuscript on Blavatsky's desk, a translation of a Gnostic fragment, bursts into flames, though nothing nearby is burned. Blavatsky appears unsurprised, even satisfied. "They do not wish these truths revealed," she says calmly, as an assistant extinguishes the small fire. The Archons resist exposure, just as Jesus warned his disciples they would. This incident, whether genuine paranormal phenomenon or cleverly staged theatrical effect, enhances Blavatsky's mystique and lends dramatic weight to her teachings about cosmic opposition to spiritual truth. It becomes a defining moment for many of her followers, convincing them they are participating in a genuine spiritual battle against powerful forces that transcend ordinary human experience. The story spreads, attracting even more seekers to Blavatsky's circle, eager to learn about these mysterious cosmic entities and how to overcome their influence. As Blavatsky's health begins to decline in the late 1880s, she becomes increasingly focused on ensuring her teachings about cosmic reality will survive her. She establishes an inner circle of students, the Esoteric section of the Theosophical Society, whom she instructs in what she claims are advanced spiritual practices derived from Jesus' secret teachings, designed to counteract archonic influence and accelerate spiritual evolution. Jesus provided specific techniques, she tells this select group, to strengthen the divine spark within us and weaken the bonds of material illusion. These methods were preserved in certain Gnostic communities that survived church persecution, passed down through initiatic lineages that eventually connected to the Tibetan masters who instructed me. During what would be her final public lecture on the subject in London in 1889, Blavatsky offers a comprehensive synthesis of her teachings about Jesus and the Archons. The conventional narrative about Jesus saving humanity from sin through his sacrificial death is a distortion of his actual mission, she declares to a packed auditorium. He came as an emissary from the realm of true divinity, beyond the archonic spheres, embodying perfect gnosis, divine knowledge, that could awaken humanity to its cosmic situation and spiritual potential. His life demonstrated the possibility of transcending archonic limitations, and his teachings provided the practical means for accomplishing this liberation. She continues with growing intensity, her voice surprisingly strong despite her failing health. Jesus taught that the Archons maintain their control primarily through our misplaced worship. When humans direct their spiritual devotion toward lesser cosmic entities mistaken for the supreme divine, whether called Jehovah, Zeus, or any other name, they strengthen the very forces that imprison them. True worship, Jesus revealed, is not obedience to external authority, but recognition of the divine light within all beings, which transcends archonic creation. These assertions provoke walkouts from several religious traditionalists in the audience, but most listeners remain transfixed by her commanding presence and the revolutionary implications of her cosmological claims. The most insidious strategy of the Archons, Blavatsky continues, her eyes scanning the audience with penetrating intensity, is convincing humans that material existence is the only reality. Jesus taught that what we perceive with our physical senses is merely the outer shell of a multidimensional cosmos, the lowest vibration of a spectrum that extends far beyond archonic domains into realms of pure divine light. Liberation begins with the recognition that we are not merely physical beings having occasional spiritual experiences, but spiritual beings temporarily inhabiting physical forms manufactured by the Archons to limit our true capabilities. In the final months of her life, confined mostly to her bed in the London headquarters of the Theosophical Society, Blavatsky dictates additional material about the Archons to her devoted secretary, Professor Edward Oakley. These notes, later published under the title The Esoteric Character of Jesus' Gospel, provide her most detailed account of what she claims were Jesus' secret teachings about cosmic reality. Jesus distinguished between three types of Archons, she dictates in a weak but determined voice. The first category are the planetary rulers, who govern cosmic forces associated with the 7 classical planets. The second are the elemental Archons, who control the basic constituents of physical matter. The third and most dangerous are the psychic Archons, who work directly with human consciousness, manipulating thought and emotion to maintain spiritual ignorance. Oakley, a former Anglican priest who abandoned his ecclesiastical career after encountering Blavatsky's teachings, raises a significant question. If Jesus understood the cosmic truth so clearly, why did he not state it explicitly in terms all could understand? Blavatsky smiles weakly. He did precisely that, Edward, but speaking plainly about the Archons to people thoroughly indoctrinated by Archonic religion would have prevented his message from taking root at all. This is why he taught in parables, using familiar agricultural and social metaphors to convey cosmic truths to minds not yet ready to comprehend them directly. To his inner circle, however, he revealed these matters explicitly, as he indicated when saying, "To you has been given the secret of the kingdom of God, but for those outside everything is in parables." On her deathbed in May 1891, Blavatsky gathers her closest disciples for a final transmission of what she insists are Jesus' authentic teachings about the Archons. Her physical form is clearly failing, but her mental clarity and spiritual intensity remain undiminished. Remember, she tells them with labored breath, that knowledge of the Archons is not meant to provoke fear, but empowerment. Jesus did not reveal their existence to discourage humanity, but to explain the cosmic context of spiritual liberation. Understanding the nature of our imprisonment is the first step toward freedom. She pauses, gathering strength for her final insights. The ultimate teaching of Jesus about the Archons, she continues, is that despite their seeming power, they are temporary phenomena in cosmic evolution. They emerged from divine error, not divine intention, and they will eventually be reabsorbed into the harmony of the pleroma as cosmic evolution fulfills itself. This is what Jesus meant by the coming of the kingdom, not a future historical event, but the progressive dissolution of archonic illusion as human consciousness awakens to its true divine nature. Her voice falters, and she motions for water, which a disciple quickly provides. "After my departure," Blavatsky says after drinking weakly, "many will attempt to discredit these teachings. Orthodox religious authorities will condemn them as heresy. Materialist scientists will dismiss them as superstition. Even within the Theosophical movement, some will try to soften or reinterpret them to make them more palatable to conventional thinking." Her piercing blue eyes, now clouded by illness but still intensely focused, scan the faces of her disciples. "You who have received this knowledge directly must preserve it in its authentic form, not as dogma to be believed, but as a cosmological framework to be verified through spiritual practice and direct gnosis." 3 days later, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky dies peacefully in her sleep, leaving behind a controversial legacy that includes her radical reinterpretation of Jesus' teachings about cosmic reality. The Theosophical Society splinters into various factions after her death, with some branches emphasizing her teachings about the Archons, while others focus on different aspects of her voluminous writings. Her ideas about Jesus as a teacher of secret Gnostic wisdom, rather than a sacrificial savior, continue to influence esoteric Christianity and alternative spiritual movements throughout the 20th century and beyond. In the decades following Blavatsky's death, archaeological discoveries lend some credence to her claims about suppressed early Christian teachings. The discovery of the Nag Hammadi Library in Egypt in 1945 reveals a collection of Gnostic texts that do indeed discuss archonic beings who rule the material cosmos and seek to keep humanity spiritually ignorant. These ancient documents describe the Demiurge and his Archons in terms remarkably similar to Blavatsky's purported revelations, though scholars debate whether this validates her claims of secret knowledge or simply demonstrates her familiarity with Gnostic concepts already documented in academic sources available during her lifetime. Meanwhile, Blavatsky's cosmological teachings about the Archons take on new relevance in the context of 20th century existential philosophy and depth psychology. Carl Jung, though critical of many aspects of Theosophy, acknowledges that the Gnostic concept of Archons represents a profound insight into the autonomous complexes that can dominate human psychology. What the ancient Gnostics described as cosmic entities, he writes in his private journal, may be understood as archetypal forces in the collective unconscious that structure human experience and often resist the integration of higher consciousness. This psychological interpretation of archonic influence offers a framework for understanding spiritual development that does not require literal belief in cosmic entities while preserving the functional essence of Blavatsky's teachings. In contemporary alternative spirituality, particularly in the New Age movement that emerged in the late 20th century, Blavatsky's teachings about Jesus and the Archons find renewed expression, often blended with concepts from quantum physics, consciousness research, and systems theory. The idea that human perception is constrained by filtering mechanisms that limit our awareness of cosmic reality has parallels in both scientific and spiritual discourse about the nature of consciousness. The Gnostic understanding of Archons as forces that structure reality in ways that limit human spiritual potential resonates with postmodern critiques of how power systems shape perception and experience. Diana Richards, a prominent consciousness researcher who acknowledges Blavatsky's influence on her thinking, suggests that, whether understood as literal entities or as metaphors for the constraining patterns in human consciousness, the concept of Archons provides a useful framework for understanding how perception can be systematically limited by forces beyond ordinary awareness. The value of this Gnostic cosmology that Blavatsky attributed to Jesus lies not necessarily in its literal truth, but in its effectiveness at mapping the territory of expanded consciousness and the obstacles encountered on that journey. For contemporary spiritual seekers drawn to Blavatsky's teachings about Jesus and the Archons, the appeal lies largely in the alternative it offers to both religious fundamentalism and scientific materialism. It provides a cosmological framework that acknowledges spiritual reality without requiring blind faith, that recognizes the limitations of ordinary human perception without dismissing the possibility of transcendent awareness. Whether approached as literal cosmological truth or psychological metaphor, the concept of archonic influence offers an explanation for why genuine spiritual awakening is so challenging in a world that systematically reinforces material values and conventional thinking. Professor Margaret Simmons, who holds the chair of comparative religious studies at Columbia University, observes, Blavatsky's interpretation of Jesus' teachings about cosmic reality may or may not represent historical truth, but it undeniably addresses existential questions that conventional Christianity often fails to engage satisfactorily. Why does spiritual awakening seem so difficult? Why do religious institutions so often betray their stated ideals? Why does material reality seem designed to distract us from deeper awareness? The Gnostic cosmology of archonic influence provides coherent answers to these questions that many find more compelling than either secular dismissal or orthodox religious platitudes. The controversial vision of cosmic reality that Helena Blavatsky claimed to have received from secret traditions preserving Jesus' authentic teachings continues to provoke both fervent adherence and dismissive skepticism. Some regard her as a genuine spiritual revolutionary who courageously revealed suppressed truths about the nature of reality and human potential. Others see her as a skilled myth-maker who wove together threads from various esoteric traditions to create a compelling alternative cosmology that addressed the spiritual hungers of her time. Whatever the ultimate verdict on her claims about Jesus and the Archons, her teachings undeniably expanded the boundaries of Western spiritual discourse and legitimized exploration beyond the constraints of conventional religious thought. In her final recorded statement on the subject, dictated just hours before her death, Blavatsky returned to what she considered the essential message of Jesus regarding the Archons. The great truth that Jesus risked everything to convey is that humanity is not merely the creation of these cosmic entities, but contains within itself a divine essence that transcends their domain entirely. Though the Archons fashioned our physical bodies and structured the material world we inhabit, they cannot touch the immortal spirit that connects each human directly to the supreme divine source. Liberation comes not through escaping the material world, but through awakening to our true nature within it, recognizing the archonic illusion for what it is, and manifesting our divine potential despite all obstacles. This is the kingdom that is within you and at hand, not a future paradise, but the ever-present reality of divine consciousness accessible to all who achieve true gnosis. As contemporary science explores the nature of reality at its fundamental levels, discovering that solid matter dissolves into probability waves and vibrating energy fields, that consciousness may be intrinsic to the cosmos rather than merely an emergent property of material complexity. Some find in these discoveries echoes of the Gnostic cosmology that Blavatsky attributed to Jesus. The possibility that consensus reality represents only a narrow band of a far vaster spectrum of existence, that human perception is structured to recognize only certain aspects of a multidimensional cosmos, offers scientific parallels to the ancient wisdom that Blavatsky claimed to have recovered from suppressed spiritual traditions. Whether one regards Helena Blavatsky as prophet or charlatan, reflects Jonathan Parker, contemporary religious historian, her impact on Western spiritual thought is undeniable. By reintroducing the Gnostic concept of Archons and positioning Jesus as a teacher of cosmic liberation rather than vicarious salvation, she fundamentally challenged both religious orthodoxy and materialist reductionism. The cosmological framework she articulated, a multidimensional universe populated by various orders of consciousness, some of which limit human spiritual perception, continues to inform alternative spirituality and esoteric Christianity to this day. As humanity faces unprecedented global challenges that conventional thinking appears inadequate to address, Blavatsky's radical vision of cosmic reality and human potential may prove increasingly relevant to the spiritual seekers of the 21st century. Whatever the ultimate truth about Jesus' teachings and the cosmic entities that Blavatsky called Archons, her controversial revelations undeniably succeeded in one respect. They shattered conventional boundaries of spiritual thought and opened Western consciousness to the possibility of a cosmic reality far more complex, mysterious, and potentially liberating than either traditional religion or materialist science had acknowledged. In doing so, she fulfilled what she claimed was Jesus' essential mission, not to establish a new religion, but to awaken humanity to the greater truth beyond all religious forms, the direct gnosis of divine reality that transcends all dogma and offers genuine spiritual freedom to those with eyes to see and ears to hear.